Can an antisocial sorcerer and a psychologically damaged elf actually manage to find a way to heal each other? Well, we're gonna find out in today's review. Hello everybody and welcome to this light novel review. I am Justus Stone, and on this channel I cover all things light novels. I do reviews like this one, news, countdowns of the most popular titles in Japan, and I also post the light novel podcast on this channel as well. So if you love light novels, or maybe you're just getting interested in them, you should consider subscribing. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing volume number 1 of Fuminori Teshima's light novel series, An Archdemon's Dilemma: How to Love Your Elf Bride. This one is released in English by J-Novel Club. If you want to pick up your own copy, I've got a link to Amazon in the description down below. Now, this is an ongoing series in Japan. There are 5 volumes currently released, and the most recent one came out in March of 2018. It's primarily told in the third person, and it focuses on main character Zagan, who is a sorcerer. This is not an isekai title, it is a pure fantasy title, and even though the term Archdemon is in the title, surprisingly it has nothing to do with defeating demon lords. In this novel, Zagan is a sorcerer, a particularly well accomplished, particularly at his young age of 18, sorcerer. The thing is, though, is that a sorcerer's life is very solitary, focused primarily on learning the secrets of magic, and also guarding against other sorcerers who, well, you know, to advance themselves would kill you and steal your own magic to make it their own. So you kind of have to set up all sorts of defenses. It makes you pretty antisocial in the long run of things. So even though Zagan isn't a evil man, he's not exactly a good man either. The title of Archdemon is actually given to an incredibly powerful sorcerer. There's 13 of them in existence. When one dies, then the other 12 will elect a new one to take the fallen person's place. Now, one of the archdemons, the local one for Zagan's area, has just recently died, and so Zagan and this one sorcerer that he is kind of friends with, or at least as close as friends as sorcerers get, the two of them go to this underground auction where they are selling off the past archdemon's goods. One of the items turns out to be an absolutely stunningly beautiful white-haired elf. A girl that, upon seeing her, stirs feelings in Zagan that he really doesn't understand, but realizes that he just can't really live without. And so he blows his entire fortune to buy the elf and takes her back with him to his castle, where the two of them try to live an existence together, even though she has been so emotionally scarred that she seems to lack emotion, and he has been so long without dealing with normal people, just has absolutely no idea how to express himself or speak in a way that doesn't come across as being abrupt or angry. And this novel, this first volume in particular, is really about the two of them kind of settling into their relationship and just kind of figuring out where they fit with each other's lives. Now, there are a couple of sort of triggerish type things that happen in this book, because it's talking about sorcery, and because sorcery in this novel is not necessarily a good thing, it does involve things like human sacrifice. Rape is mentioned, although thankfully never actually happens, and of course there is slavery. And in fact, the elf, Nephi, is a slave. She was going to be a slave of the archdemon who died, and of course she has been purchased by Zagan, so technically she's his slave. In fact, when this book was originally announced that it was coming out in English, it was titled How to Love Your Slave Elf Bride, but, well, J-Novel Club, for understandable reasons, kind of went back and forth with the Japanese publisher and sort of decided that having the title slave in the title was maybe not really indicative of the tone of the series, and so they've eliminated it since then. While that doesn't mean that slavery's been completely abolished from the novel, it does reflect the more equal term relationship that Zagan and Nefi have. The truth is that he's fallen in love with her, and that he wants her to be his equal. He doesn't want to be her master. He doesn't want her to be his slave. He wants her to stand beside him. And so, even though the way that he goes about obtaining her is questionable, at least the way that he treats her and acts towards her is far more decent than what the whole slave title probably would have implied. In fact, pretty much the whole slavery thing is everybody else's perception of their relationship. So, but yeah, it at least is not that kind of a relationship between those characters. In fact, in a lot of ways, this book is actually kind of sweet because of the relationship between these two characters. And, well, actually, maybe sweet's not quite putting it right. As I said when I was sort of talking about this book, these characters are really emotionally damaged. Zagan, we find out, has this pretty horrible backstory, and even though he doesn't necessarily look on it with disdain, it's obvious that him having come into sorcery the way he did, and the fact that he is young and that he's really having to defend himself and everything else, it really truly has made him incapable of having normal human relationships. And he really has started to sort of adopt this idea that if you're not a sorcerer, you are inferior, and that people really, the weak, really aren't worth bothering with. And then we have Nefi, who also has a very sad and somewhat twisted backstory to her. And in her case, where Zagan has sort of adopted this very gruff and I don't care about anything kind of attitude, Nefi has basically shut down. Her face lacks much in the way of emotion. Her voice really doesn't display a lot of emotion. In fact, probably one of the cuter things that runs throughout the book is that Zagan starts to realize that he can kind of guess at her emotions by the way her ears move. The story is really about these two damaged individuals and how their relationship with one another starts to heal those wounds. I'll be honest, in terms of the story itself, it hits a lot of really predictable beats. There's not a lot that's going to probably shock or surprise you, even the reveal of sort of who the main villain of this particular volume is, but that's really beside the point. What this book is all about is, A, talking about sorcery and the world building around sorcery in this world, and, as I said, the relationship between Nefi and between Zagan. Now, sorcery in this world is, well, I mean, it really is based upon the idea of crests. So we've seen this before, magic circles and symbols in the circles and everything else. It does get kind of complex, and to be honest, it still makes sense and works quite well in the world that's being developed. And I kind of like this whole thing. There is, of course, the church on the one hand who opposes sorcerers, because of course they do evil. And then, of course, we have these archdemons, these 13 incredibly powerful sorcerers. And on the church side, there are 12 holy swords. So there's almost a balance in terms of these elite soldiers of the church and these elite sorcerers. So there is world building going on in this volume, and it made me more interested to see sort of where this series is going to go. And as I said, the relationship between Zagan and Nefi, it's sweet in its own sort of damaged kind of way. And so I'm curious to see where their relationship will go and how these characters will grow and develop as the series proceeds. There's other sort of secondary characters that get involved into this book, and one in particular is actually a servant of the church. So her relationship with Zagan and Nefi could be very, very complicated. So that's another sort of area for this series to grow and to develop. And as I said, there's a lot of groundwork being laid here about the world and how it functions, and we don't know much about these archdemons. They're very shadowy type characters. We in fact don't know anything about them. We really only find out the smallest amount of information about the archdemon who died. So there's a lot of potential in this series going forward, both with the characters themselves, because they're starting from very, very damaged, it's the word of this video, damaged places psychologically, so they've got tons of room for growth. And in particular, I'm interested to see if, as Nephi kind of softens Zagan, or if she manages to soften Zagan, if he'll actually realize it, and if it will have continued effects in terms of his relationships with other people, in particular the people in the villages nearby him and stuff, and just to see sort of how that relationship will go. As I said, there's a lot of sort of room for growth in this book, and at the same time, it's not like it's a major cerebral trip or anything. I mean, it really is a story about a boy and a girl and how their relationship is kind of healing what hurts their hearts, which makes this sound really sappy, but it's most definitely not. And as I said, Zagan is not a good guy, but he's not evil either. You know, that's probably, they actually, I think they say that in the book. They're like, he's not evil, but he's not a good man. And that's probably the best way to describe the character. So all in all, an archdemon's dilemma wasn't bad, actually. It was definitely had some fun bits to it. As I said, the relationship between Nephi and Zagan is certainly a interesting one, and one that has a lot of potential for growth. There was some cool little world building bits. Obviously, the story in this one was a little bit predictable. That's kind of maybe the downside on this volume. But you know what? Like I said, you're not really signing up for the story in a volume 1. This one, obviously, as I said, it lays a lot of groundwork that this series could go a lot of different places. So it's more looking forward to the future when it comes to the actual storyline. But definitely, I'm kind of on board with these two characters. I like them. Kind of like some of the secondary characters that are being introduced in this one. And it'll be interesting to see how their relationships develop as the series proceeds. So for my next review, well, if you watched my review on How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom Volume 3, you already know it's going to be volume number 4 of How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom. This, of course, is going to be the title that we are talking about in the next light novel podcast. And since volume number 4 ends the first arc, I had to hurry up and get caught up so that I was up to speed, because that's what we're going to cover in the podcast. So volume number 4 of Realist Hero will be my next review. So if you're brand new to the channel and you love light novels, you should subscribe. I do reviews like this every single week, as well as countdowns with popular titles in Japan, news, and of course the light novel podcast is posted here as well. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye bye for now.